Hello. Welcome to our December conversation of women and blended families. I'm Gayla Grace. I serve on the Family Life Blended team, where our ministry is all about serving blended families. And today, the focus of our conversation is on creating harmony in our marriage as we learn how to understand and manage ourselves better and how we relate to others. We have stepfamily expert Ron Deal with us today. Yes, it's our first time to have a man on our live stream, and he's going to share some insight from his brand new book. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But if you haven't joined us before, we are live the second Tuesday of every month at 12 p.m. Central on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube on the Family Life Blended page. We have a different guest every month with a different topic. Now, before we get started, I like to know who is with me live, and I'm interested in hearing where you're watching or listening from. So leave me your name and where you're from in the comments, and I have a question for you today. Are you through with your Christmas shopping? I want to know. Yes, no, halfway. Maybe you'll help me feel better if you tell me you're behind, because I'm behind. I get a little overwhelmed this time of year. We have lots of kids and sister-in-law and daughter-in-laws, and I have 2 grandbabies this year. I got to get just the right gift for those grandbabies. So I'm still working on my Christmas shopping. How about you? Let me know. Now, as we wait for ladies to come on, be sure to tag a friend who you know would benefit from our conversation. Even if they can't join us now, they can always watch the recorded version later. And remember, you can put your questions in the comments related to our topic today, and we'll answer as many of those as we can live while we're on here or later in the comments. All right. Has anybody told me whether they're through with their Christmas shopping or not? I'm still waiting for those comments. And while you put those up, I'm going to introduce our guest, Ron Deal. Now, most of you know Ron. He is the director of Family Life Blended, which means I work for Ron. And he's a great boss, I might add. But Ron is a best-selling author. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, a podcaster, and a popular conference speaker. But honestly, most of us on this live stream know Ron as a stepfamily expert who we trust and respect because we have learned a great deal from him. So welcome, Ron. I'm so thankful to have you joining me today.
Wow, Gayla, that was quite an introduction. Thank you that was very kind. And yes, you'll get that raise.
Okay, yes.
It worked.
I love it.
No,
Ron,
I just got to say, you have been such an awesome addition to our team. And it is great to have you. And I'm glad to be with these ladies. And no, I don't have gender confusion. I'm male and I'm okay with that. But I am thrilled to be with you today.
Well, I'm glad to have you, and this is kind of role reversal for us
Yes,
because
that's
you're
right.
usually the one asking the questions.
Which means I'm in trouble because now it's payback, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay, Ron, do you have your shopping done?
Yes, I do. I gotta confess, I never have it done by this point, but I guess the Lord was with me. Things lined up. With our family, we decided to draw names this year. My 2 sons, and they're, are poor. And, we're trying to take it easy on them. And so it just so happened, I was able to walk into the gifting, just sort of happened. So believe it or not, yeah, I'm done.
That's awesome. Good for you. We draw names too, and that does help, especially our 5 kids.
Yes.
Everybody has a spouse or significant other, and it kind of helps. All of
And
that
now that
helps.
we have grandchildren,
I know.
everybody can't afford to buy for everybody, but we get to buy for the grandkids.
I know. And our kids have said they want to buy for those babies, even, it's just fun
That's
because
sweet.
they're aunts and uncles now. And so they think it's fun to buy for the babies. So that's fun. All right. I have somebody from New York. No Christmas shopping since they're moving. Oh, yeah. No, you can't Christmas shop while you're moving. That's a lot.
Right.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to get some more comments here and we'll find out what people are doing. I just need them to help me feel better because my shopping's not done, but it's okay. That may not be what happens here. Ron, let's talk about your new book coming out in January. It's titled The Mindful Marriage, create your best relationship through understanding and managing yourself. There's a cover, you can see that. And I am really excited about this book. I've gotten to participate in a book study with it. Now, you say that this is your first book written for all marriages and not just blended family couples, but you say it might be your most important book for blended families. So, why do you say that?
I say that because this material cuts through all the fluff. It gets down to the human experience. Every single person on the planet will find themselves within the pages of this book. And it has implication for every relationship. So
Mm,
while the title has marriage in it, that's the first application we're making.
right,
But when you get to the latter chapters of the book, you discover that everything you've learned applies to how you parent, how you co-parent, how you deal with coworkers in the workplace. And so it is broad in its application. And because of that, and because it cuts through all the fluff, what I mean by that is it gets down to the heart of what makes us tick and what makes
right,
relationships work.
right.
And so I know it is going to be significantly helpful for blended family couples.
Yeah, so I want to jump in and talk about a common blended family dynamic and have you react to it and talk to us about the things that are in your book. I mean,
Okay.
I know that this is what you do, but I heard from a stepmom recently who now we're in the middle of this busy holiday season, and she was frustrated because her husband's former spouse had texted and said, "Hey, I know we've already worked out the schedule for the week of Christmas, but I just found out my parents have decided to travel in from
Mm,
California.
mm,
And, my mom, she's not in good health and they want some time with the kids. So we really need to change the schedule for that week."
mm.
Well, she's furious. I
Yeah.
mean, the ex changes the schedule all too frequently. And the stepmom, she feels powerless because she knows that her husband is going to side with his ex wife. And so then she becomes angry with him and they end up in a big fight. And I mean, this is a common pattern for them.
Yeah.
So talk to me.
Okay. It's a great case study. I want to lead by just pointing something out to everyone. What's different about this book is that Nan and I are example number one. So, in all my other writing, I'm talking to blended families about the uniquenesses and specifics of blended family living. In this book, Nan and I are the example, we're the testimony. And it's our story wrapped around principles from our co authors, Terry and Sharon Hargrave, the principles that they've developed that are now being used around the world in an academic setting. But we're now bringing through this book those principles to everyday people just
Right.
trying to do life. And so we're thrilled. It's really our testimony of how the Hargraves helped us, saved our marriage. We
Hmm.
hit a wall back in 2007, started us down this road. We've been talking, teaching this stuff for a long time, but now we finally put it in a form that's easily accessible for people. So, having said that, I know how common and practical this material is. Let's
Mm,
look at your little example. So, one of the things that's going on, we would say when we talk blended family talk, is we would say, yeah, well, husband, ex-husband in this case, is caught between his wife and his ex-wife. He's trying to keep peace as a co-parent. He's trying
right.
to
Hmm.
do, and he feels the pressure of that. But at the same time, his wife feels like, hey, are you giving in again? And we don't have any boundaries around our home. And how come we have to make all the changes just because she asks? We can go another level beyond that, below that, and say, okay, what's going on for this stepmom? She's feeling there's two main things that we need in relationships for them to be healthy: love and trust.
Right.
Trust is that thing that gives us emotional safety. Like, because I can trust you, I can lean into you and give you my heart. If I can't trust you, then I don't want to lean in.
Right.
And by the way, a lot of people watching know exactly what it is to not be able to trust. Like, your
Hmm.
previous marriage was an example of, I loved you, you loved me, I guess, but
Hmm.
boy, did we not feel safe with each other. And that was the beginning of the end of our relationship. So here's a stepmom who doesn't feel safe. That's what step parents feel a lot of in their situation. They're powerless. You mentioned
Right.
that. And
Right.
with that comes, I don't feel safe, which means I don't trust you, my husband, to protect us, to value us and value me above this pressure you feel with your ex-wife. So because she feels unsafe, it's going to lead to this reactivity. It turns out that your brain, basically, when you feel any measure of threat, feel either unloved or unsafe, you go into fight or flight. We've all heard of that,
Right.
right? You
Right.
see a bear, you're going into fight or flight. Well, there's four main expressions of fight or flight: blame, shame, control, or escape. And we're going to help people in this book discover what your reactive coping style is. But let's just say her style is control. One form of control is criticism. It's where you start getting, oh, wait a minute, you're not going to do this. You're going to take that boundary back, and we're not giving the kids up. And she starts trying to tell her
Mm.
husband, because what is she doing? She's trying to take control of the unsafe situation and make
Right.
it better.
Right.
But what we know is her reactivity, her control criticism stuff is going to make her husband feel what? Well, he too needs to feel loved and safe.
Right.
And he's in this moment not feeling safe, because here
Right.
you are trying to tell me what to do, and you're not taking into consideration my ex and my kids and what I've got to be mindful of. And
Mhm.
now they're fighting at the deepest level. Neither one of them feels safe in their marriage. And there it is. The phone call came from his ex-wife, but their marriage ends up feeling unsafe. And unsafe leads us to self-protect, be
Right.
guarded, pull back. And now they are on opposite sides of the house. No
Right.
longer partners facing this together, but now we are distant and blaming the ex and blaming
Mhm.
you and blaming you. And
Mhm. Mhm.
now we don't know what to do.
Yeah. And we're going to kind of unpack that further and talk about what we do. But I want us to go a little deeper first into these four coping mechanisms that you
Mm-hmm.
talked about. So we have an assessment that we're going to put in the comments that people can have access to that will help them understand what their more natural coping reactivity is. So you mentioned the four: blaming, shaming, control, or escape. Let's talk about each of those a little bit deeper. So let's say that, okay, control is one of them, but what
Mm-hmm.
if, blaming is one of them? How would a person react if they
Yeah.
tend to blame?
Blame's one of mine, one of my good go-tos. All right. I'm,
Okay.
I'm a blame controller. And by the way, we flesh all this out in the book, and you're going to see Nan and I exposed for who we were and who we are and who we could be, but we're trying to get a hold on. So blame is, wait a minute, you have to be wrong about this. When you have a disagreement, for me, it takes the form of defensiveness,
Okay.
where if Nan's got an opinion about me or about something or about something I've done, for example, one of my go-tos is to fall back into arguing her into liking me, which never works. By the way, I don't recommend it to anybody, but I kind of try to defend myself so she will see me more favorably and not, in anger. And so that's a form of blame. This has to be about you. You think I'm one thing, and I'm telling you this is about your opinion, not about me. So it's a
Mhm.
deflection away from me toward you. It's what Adam and Eve did in the garden, where they blamed one another
Right.
for their sinful choices. That's essentially what the blame mechanism is. But can you see it is fight? Between
Yeah.
fight and flight, it's
Uh-huh.
fight.
Okay.
I'm coming at you to convince you you're wrong about this. And the way we go about it varies with different people, but essentially it's a blame posture.
Yeah, and so really, we're trying to change that other person. I think we
Right.
see this in marriage a lot. If
Yes.
we could just change our spouse, then that's going to take care of our issues.
Gayla, you just said something that's really important. Like, all four of these mechanisms are essentially all trying to do that thing, right? What you just said. We're trying to change the other person, child, stepchild, co-parent, spouse, whatever it is. We're trying to change them into being more loving and more safe for us.
Mhm.
The
Right.
irony is that reactivity in us actually gets us the opposite. But we
Right.
get stuck in part because, yeah, we're stubborn. Yeah, sometimes we're prideful and we just don't even recognize it. But there's even another component that we sort of walk people through in the book, and that is the neurological component. Somewhere in every person's life, your brain begins to develop a little rut about how it's going to react to things that feel unloving and unsafe. It
Mm.
could have been when you were 2, it could have been when you were 25. Somewhere along the path, we all develop this little reactivity. And once your brain has decided how it's going to react, it will do it ad nauseum for the rest of your life, unless you renew your mind which is ultimately where this book is going to go. We can come back to that, but you renew your mind to change how your brain reacts to
Right.
things. And blame is just one of those responses.
Okay, and so there's been some kind of prior experiences, is what you're saying, that
Mhm.
have created this rut in our mind that we just go back to every time, and unless we do something different, which is what we're trying to understand here, and what your book really talks about is how we change these ruts or these patterns, right? Is that what
Ex-
you're saying?
Exactly. The technical term is neural networks in your brain and your body. It's dysregulation when you feel that measure of threat, and those are the big technical psychological terms. But on everyday vernacular, this is when you get triggered, when
Yeah.
you get anxious, when you feel like, what's happening in our usness? I don't
Mm,
feel confident right now. I don't feel
mm.
loved right now. I don't feel like I can trust you with my heart right now. Those are the hard moments. And, you know, in the good moments of life and marriage, we're all pretty nice people,
Right.
especially Christian folk. Like, we're
Yes.
trying hard to put on love, joy, peace, patience. But it's in the hard moments where we get completely dysregulated. And have you ever heard somebody say, I lost my religion in that moment?
Yes.
That's a dysregulated moment. Like, we all know we can become somebody we don't enjoy and makes our situation worse, not better.
Mhm.
That's what this book addresses, is the hard moments. Who are you? What's going on? Chase it down. We're going to figure out what it is, and we're going to give you a pathway out.
Yeah, and you know what happens sometimes too when we get out of sorts or dysregulated, as you say, is then we just keep pounding that other person of, but if you would do something different, then
Yes.
I would be okay.
Yeah. And think about, what's the statement? What I'm saying to my wife in that moment is, if you will love me better or be more trustworthy for me, then I won't ever feel what I'm feeling. I won't
Right.
feel threat. I won't feel insecure. For me, it's inadequacy is one of the things I want to run away from.
Mm,
Am I good enough? I don't know that I'm good enough. Uh, and that the theory that I can get Nan to love me well enough that my inadequacy goes away is false.
mhm.
It is not true. It will never be true. And there's nothing biblical about it at all. I don't get other people to change so I become more godly. I have to train myself in godliness.
Right.
And that's what we're going to try to help people to do. Let me say something about shame, control, and
Yeah.
escape just real quickly.
Yeah.
Blame is about the other person. That's a fight mechanism. Shame is, I blame me. It's my fault. The
Right.
reason you're not talking to me, the reason you're into your phone right now instead of actually having conversation, it must be I'm not attractive enough, good enough, likable enough, something about me.
Unworthy.
Shame is that, yes, the all arrows directed back, and those people go in on themselves. That's a flight. Fight is about you. Flight
Mhm.
is in on me.
Okay.
The other fight is control. We mentioned that. And it
Right.
takes forms like criticism and defensiveness and arguing and manipulation, where you try to get the other person to think differently about whatever the circumstances are. Escape is I run into something that's flight. I run into something that takes my pain away. And that's something, well, there's 1,000 of them.
Mm.
I can run into a person, a relationship. I can run into porn. I can run into just staring at Instagram videos all day long, just
Oh,
scrolling.
yes.
I
Uh-huh.
can run into drugs and alcohol and gambling and, all the habits, overworking, all the things that make us feel competent and okay. And I don't have to deal with that thing over there. Now,
Yeah, even habits that could be healthy, exercise, eating, I mean, they can be to the extreme and become
exactly.
unhealthy.
And the whole point is, I'm trying to run away from my pain. I
Right.
don't feel loved. I don't feel safe. What's going to eliminate that pain for me? Some people are all four. Nan would
Mm,
tell you she does all four of those things at different points in our conflict. I'm primarily blame and control, but on occasion I've been known to do some of the other things. Like, the funny thing about it is, this is the human experience. We all do this. Every person on the planet gets dysregulated
mhm,
probably once to 10 times a day. And if you're in a tense relationship, many, many, many times a day. Some people stay dysregulated pretty much constantly. Depression is a state of constant dysregulation.
mm.
This is how we live, how we do life. And it happens when somebody cuts you off on the freeway. It happens when your spouse turns away from you and you feel like you've lost their focus, their attention, their affection. It happens when a child says, "You're not my mom. I don't have to do what you say."
Exactly. That's what I was just thinking. There's so many blended family dynamics that create tension in marriage,
Mhm.
in family. And so it's not unusual that we're going to end up in some of this dysregulated state.
Exactly. And, a kid who says, "You're not my mom," is dysregulated.
Mhm. Oh.
And one of the disciplines we teach in the book is, okay, once you learn all this stuff about yourself as it applies to your marriage, the beautiful thing is that everything you just learned is going to apply to your parenting, your step parenting, your work relationships. So when that child says, "You're not my mom, I don't have to do what you say," you've learned how to regulate yourself in the midst of their dysregulation. Two people dysregulated is a mess.
Yeah.
One person self-regulating, and by the way, the Bible's word for self-regulation is self-control. It's
Yeah.
it's just that simple.
Right.
One person being in self-control when the other person is not is the opportunity to work through, redeem the moment, help that child in this case
Mhm.
learn what's going on with them and learn to act differently,
Right.
act better. But if I don't regulate me, I can't help them.
Right. Okay, so let's move on into that. So we've talked about these reactivity states, but let's talk about how do we regulate ourselves? So you talked about
Mm.
renewing our mind, Romans 12:2. All right, so share that with me now.
Yeah, so be transformed by the renewing of your brain. Wait. No, that's not what it says. It says renewing your mind.
Right.
Gayla, did you know your mind and your brain are two different things?
Okay.
Your mind is your consciousness, your soul. It's the part of you that has agency and choice. Your brain is a physical aspect of your body that, like muscles, if you learn to
Hmm.
play golf, you would develop muscle memory and your body knows how to swing that club better than it ever could because you practiced over and over. Your brain actually has muscle memory, if you will. It's those neurological ruts we were talking about.
Okay, right.
And it learns how to do certain things just really well. All of us get in the car and drive every single day, and you don't think about turning on the blinker because your brain has a rut. It is developed. It knows exactly how to do that when you need it. When you started driving, you didn't know how to do any of that stuff, especially in all with five things going on at once. And you had to
Exactly.
you had to think about every element of it all the time, right?
Right.
That's the way our brain works. Once you've learned how to respond to your spouse's criticism, you don't have to think about it anymore. Your brain
Wow.
will respond to that criticism the same way every single time, and you will be a victim of your reactivity. When you renew your mind, you tell your brain what to do that's different, that's godly, that's helpful, that's righteous, that is
Hmm.
pursuing more love and more safety in the relationship. But we have to discipline our minds.
Right.
So, what we do in this book, just real quickly, high level, is we're going to help you identify your old ruts.
Hmm.
We're going to help you find out how to begin to move out of those things. There's a process, a 4-step process, and you're going to develop a map. Literally, the book's a little bit like a workbook. You're going to do some things right in it and create this understanding of yourself that helps you know what to do. And
Okay.
then you got to practice. At the end of
Hmm.
the day, you got to practice to
Hmm.
develop a new brain, a new mind that is renewed in Jesus and this power of the Spirit.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging that once we change our patterns, once we renew our mind and we change these, we put new disciplines in place for us,
Mhm.
then we learn it becomes a natural tendency for us instead of going back to this dysfunctional rut that we're used to, that we just habit, we just go back to it. But because I think that what happens sometimes is we lose hope that things are ever going to change. We
Mhm.
think about this situation with the stepmom and her husband and the dealings with the ex-spouse and how it sparks an argument every time. But what you're saying, Ron, is it doesn't have to be that way.
That's right. It doesn't have to be that way because you can learn how to put on self control in a dysregulated moment and be different.
Right.
Now, it's not easy.
Right.
And Nan would want me to say this, so I'm going to say it.
Okay.
This book is deep, calling to deep. In fact, that was exactly what one of the endorsers, we got 28 endorsements. Again, I'm not bragging on me. This is the Hargraves material we're helping to move forward into the world. And we got 28 because people can see This is different. This is not a typical marriage book. It is not light and fluffy. It's not feel good. This is discipleship. And so
Right.
let me just say it out loud. If you don't want to grow as a person, don't read this book. I don't think you're going to enjoy it at all. And I'm not being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I'm really being honest. But if you want to grow as a person, as a follower of Christ, you want to mature within your hard relationship moments, this is absolutely the book. And I don't care if it's ex-spouse, co-parent, a child, I don't care what the relationship is, it's going to have down to the bottom line application to that relationship.
Yeah, and there's great exercises in it to help us consider where our reactivity comes from and then what we can do about it. And some of it, as Christians, we know some of these things that we end up telling lies to ourselves that create problems for us. And that's part of what you're saying. We've got to change in ourselves. We've got to do some of those things differently.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that because in some ways, the material in this book is not new. You've heard pieces of it in other places and maybe read this or that or this concept there. But what is different about it is how it's all put together.
Hmm.
Everybody's heard a good sermon. We all know the Bible teaches, the New Testament over and over and over again talks about taking off your old self. That's your
Right.
sinful flesh self. By the way, flesh, brain is part of that flesh. It's part of your
Mm.
old self. And
Mhm.
putting on the new self, being renewed in the image of its creator in Christ Jesus. But how do we do that? We've all heard that sermon and we walk
Exactly.
away and go, yeah, I still got reactive when my kid looked at me wrong. I still flew off the handle when my husband didn't do whatever.
Mhm.
He said he would do that task and he didn't do the task and I had to say it 6 times and now I'm just mad and I'm going to get my hair done. That's escape. Guess
Oh,
what?
you're entering the woman life.
I'm sorry. But the point is, how do I put on my new self? That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what this material does better than anything I've ever found. I've been in marriage and family ministry for 37 years now. This book has a more impact on my life,
Mm.
my discipleship, my being a husband and a father than anything I've ever seen.
Wow. Yeah, that's encouraging. I think that's what we want our viewers to understand is the benefits that can come from this, but they have to do the work. They
They have
have
to
to
do
be
the work.
willing to look at themselves and quit pointing the finger at the other person, whether it is their spouse or it's a stepchild or it's an ex-spouse. We have to be willing to look at ourselves and what is our part.
Yeah. And I'll just say, if you're unsure, dive in.
Absolutely.
Actually, the assessment that you're making available gives you a little window into the kind of thing you're going to learn in much more detail within the book. So give it a try. It's free. And my guess is in about 15 minutes, you're gonna see something on paper about yourself and you're gonna go, oh my goodness, that's me. In my worst moments, this is who I become. And I don't really like that person very much.
Right.
How do I take off that old person and put on my new? And that's the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be a hard journey, but the benefits are worth doing it. And I think that's the thing that we're trying to give a little bit of a smattering of what the book is and what you can benefit from
Mhm.
it. And you just dive in and you begin. So I've had a question come in and says having to deal with a difficult situation when I communicate with him. It drains me emotionally. How do I deal with this? How can I get along with him when he always feels like he is in the right?
Mm.
We all have people in our life like that, don't we, Ron?
Exactly. Difficult moments, difficult situations. Okay. Because we don't know exactly what he's right about, let me just sort of make something up and let's just see if we can try.
Yeah,
Um, so what triggers her about him always being right is that seems prideful, and it is.
right.
And it seems like he's closed to what I'm trying to communicate, and he is. And because of that, it's deeply frustrating. In that moment, what are you feeling? Unsafe and not
Hmm.
loved. The first question is, beyond this moment with your husband, have you ever felt unsafe and unloved before? Many of us can go, yeah, my relationship with my dad. Yeah, my husband.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
whatever. There's something we can connect it to. This is not the first time. And the reason that's important is because your brain decided a long time ago what to do with feeling unloved. And you're going to be a slave to that reactivity even today,
Right.
unless you renew your mind. And so connecting that big dot and how it works in you is important. So you'll just know, yeah, this is the thing in me I've got to fight. Because what I want to do is react to him, to feeling unloved. And I want to get angry. I want to get blame, shame, control, or escape. I want to do something in this situation to change my husband, to wake him up, however
Right.
you think about that. And that too is only going to make it worse. Because we can come back to this, but not only do I have a reactive coping style and Nan has a reactive coping style, but in the book, we're going to show you what happens when those two things collide.
Yeah.
We call that the couple pain cycle, and it is painful. It is
Right.
deeply, and it is so hard to get out of. Nan and I used to take weeks to work through our couple pain, and we didn't ever really work through it. We just sort of put it off until it came back up again. We now, when we have conflict, which we still do, I
Hmm.
mean, it's minutes. Gayla, it's often a minute or less that we
Wow.
are able to recover. Now, this is from doing the work.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's a quick fix. It is a hard fix, but it is a fabulous fix. Let me say one more thing about to this woman. So your job in that moment is to regulate you.
Yeah.
You see him getting prideful, you see him doing, and you know what? We're going to show you a little 4-step process. You're going to say something like this out loud. You know what I feel in this moment is I feel unsafe. And that's what I usually do with feeling unsafe is I usually get mad at you and angry and I try to get you to open your eyes. But the truth is, first of all, vertical truth, God loves me, even though I'm not sure whether you love me very much right now. God loves me, and I'm going to rest in that. The second thing I've learned is I'm worthy, whether you don't love me right now or not. I actually have an inherent worth. And so as I'm saying this out loud, I'm reminding myself that I can respond out of that worth, even if I'm not sure you're open to what I'm saying. And so what I'm going to do differently is instead of being angry and critical of you, which I normally do, I'm going to sit here a minute and try to listen to what you have to say and see if I can hear it from a different standpoint. I'm going to move toward you rather than move away from you. Now, that was a big little speech that I just gave, the 4 steps.
It
And
was.
And imagine what her husband would do upon hearing all of this. Number one, he'd be going, "Who are you? What did you do with?"
Right.
Because right now I'm used to a barrage of anger and stuff coming at me, and I didn't get that. And like, wow, I don't even know what to do with this. We show you how when you put on humility, it actually opens your partner up to you rather than closing them down, which is what pride does. And number two, that's what the husband's reaction was. The wife is now moving herself actively out of angry reactions and reactivity to choosing to love in spite of,
Hmm.
from reaction to self-giving love. We just changed the whole dance
Hmm.
by what she put on. Now, that's not the end of the story. Who knows how her husband will respond? Maybe he goes, "Yeah, you're right, I'm a jerk." Maybe he feels maybe, I don't know. Or maybe it's 2 years from now that he finally comes to that. I don't know. But I
Hmm.
do know when you take charge of your response and put on self-giving love, which is what God does for us, I know it changes something. I don't know how much, I don't know how quick, I don't know how thorough, but I do know this moment went from usually really bad to it just got a little better.
Hmm.
And that's the power.
Yeah, and the thing is, we know this. We know what Galatians 5:22 and 23 says about the
Yes,
fruits of the Spirit, the gentleness and the self control. And yet, when we get into this dysregulated cycle, that stuff goes out the window. I
it
mean,
does.
it really requires some intentional effort to sit back and say, I'm not going to allow my natural tendencies to take over here.
That's
I'm,
exactly right.
I'm making an intentional choice to do something different.
Yeah, Gayla, I think I said this on a podcast that you and I did together, in another time, another place. Your brain does not know the difference between a bear running at you in your backyard, you taking a walk and coming up on a rattlesnake, and your spouse's criticism.
Wow.
Your brain does not know the difference. It only does fight or flight in the form of blame, shame, control, or escape. That's all it knows to do. As
Wow.
long as we let that dictate our responses, we will react at one another out of pain rather than responding to one another out of love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, that's the game changer. Like, I am putting on a new self in this moment. It has to change some of the outcomes somehow.
Yeah. Okay, so I've had a question come in pertaining to this. It says, I know my spouse won't do this with me.
Mm-hmm.
Does it still work?
Yes, it does. We talk about this in the book. There was a season of many years in our relationship when Nan, in her pain from her grief of the loss of our son Connor, who died
Right.
in 2009, she began to drink, escape. She'd never been an escape person in our marriage up until that point, but she started slowly, and it built over time, and it got to the point where she was drinking quite a bit at night after I went to sleep. I didn't even realize how much she was drinking. And then she was functional the next day. And so it was sort of out of sight, out of mind. And plus, we had so much distance in our relationship during that time. I really wasn't paying much attention to how much she was drinking. I wasn't trying to control that. I was working on me. I was a controller. I was trying not to be a controller.
Right.
So we were sort of staying in our lanes, running parallel for a season. And at the end of the day, I was doing a lot of work on me and our usness by myself. She was just drinking. And it was only when she began to feel a conviction of heart and had a moment with God that was life-changing and so merciful that she began to partner with me in working on her usness. But there was a season where I didn't know where she was or what she was trying to do. I was just trying to deal with me.
Right.
Matthew 7, deal with the log in your eye, not the speck in the other person's eye. We, like a lot of people, spend a lot of time trying to get the speck out of our spouse's eye. And we do. It is so human nature to focus on the speck. No, I during that season of our life, I was focused on my log, and I was working on it so hard that she would tell you she didn't know if I was even, aware of her or really thinking about her very much. And I was, but I was just trying to manage me. So and looking back, we have had this conversation. Looking back, we would both say that during that season that I was really focused on me, but she really wasn't sort of helping our usness. That what I was doing, working on me, was rippling into her. She saw the humility coming and growing
Okay.
within me.
Right.
She saw that I was less controlling and less blaming. She saw that I was focused on trying to be my best giving self to her. And even though she was still stuck with the alcohol, it was telling her things that she could begin to trust eventually, which when the time came that she put away the alcohol, then all of a sudden her trust began to grow toward me because of what she had seen all along. So I guess at the end of the day, I was helping to repair our usness and rebuild trust, even though I didn't know it.
Right. And I think that's what's encouraging for people to hear is that even if their spouse isn't willing to contribute and do their part that we would want them to do, our actions can spill over as they see us really wanting this marriage to work and doing our part, even when we don't see that they're doing theirs, because that does happen in different seasons. Sometimes people are just distracted by things that are going on in their life, and they don't have the emotional energy to try to do something different. They're just coping with life.
You're exactly right. And I'm going to add one other thought. I, like this person who made the comment, there was a season of our marriage where I thought, it doesn't matter if I work on me, she's not going to work on her. And that was a prideful comment on my part. That was me judging her. That was me putting her in a box and saying she's not going to change. Well, here's part of what I learned. The man I was during that season of our life was not helping her to change. Helping in the sense of creating an environment where she's more likely to change. Once I began to work on my log in my eye, what I discovered is she naturally moved into that space much more easily because I was less of a difficult person to get along with.
Wow.
So again, there is power we have agency in managing who we are. Stop trying to manage the other person. Start managing yourself and trust the Holy Spirit to work in spite of what has been. That's where the hope is.
Which is really what Scripture tells us to do anyway. It is all about learning, having our own relationship with the Lord and trusting Him to show us where we need to change, where we need to do things differently. And just like you said, get the log out of your eye instead of focusing it. But it's so much easier, Ron, to just look at the other person
It
and to
is.
just say, if you would change, if you would do your part, things would be easier here. And yet, that is not the answer. That's what we're saying. That is not the answer.
Yeah, and again, when you break it down, it's really interesting because I did this for a lot of, and I still am able to do it. And I want to say that, like, now that I know this about myself, I recognize I still have this in me, this
Right?
temptation to blame and control, and I have to manage it all the time.
Right?
But it's getting easier and easier because of practice, 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 practice. What we're saying when we take that posture is, if you don't change, I can't change. Wow. So I'm a slave to who I am because you aren't
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not true. That's not
Mm-hmm.
right. And by the way, when you stand before the Lord someday, He's not going to say, Ron, I'm going to cut you a break because your wife just didn't quite come through for you.
Exactly.
He's not going to say, He's holding me accountable for me.
Yeah.
That's why put on self control.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go back now to the how we started this conversation with this stepmom who is frustrated with her spouse because of the way that she knows he's going to respond to the
Mhm.
ex-wife. And so her response was kind of in a blaming. But let's talk about this from a regulated point of view. So, what let's give some suggestions about how we would
Okay.
handle this in a self-regulated way.
Okay. So again, the 4 steps are: say what you feel, say what you normally do with it, remind yourself of the truth, and then say what you're going to do different based on the truth. So out loud, she might say, okay, I feel a little unsafe because you just had a phone call with your ex, and that usually means our life's going to change. And what I typically do with that is I get irate and I get mad at you and I get mad at her and I'm mad at everybody and I stomp around the house and I look like a fool. But the truth is, you and I have agency. We can make decisions. We can make choice. We can figure out this thing out, and we're going to have to take into consideration some other things. And it's not going to be the end of the world. We've done this before. We'll have to navigate this, but we can do it together. And based on that, I am then going to sit here with you and not get irate. I'm going to try to listen. I'm going to try to absorb. We're going to try to, uh, you know, negotiate this together about what we're going to do. And I'm going to start by shutting up now. And that is she got to her self-regulation. Her husband saw her get to that. He now appreciates that she is trying to manage her log in her eye. It invites him to start managing the log in his eye. And he's going to go, well, you know what? I feel unsafe because my ex called. And I feel like if I don't accommodate, I usually accommodate her. I just give in. I shame myself. I can't believe I brought this woman into my children's lives. And he's doing his 4 steps. The truth is, no, I'm not stuck. I do have agency. We can make decisions. I don't have to do everything she wants. I can think this through with you and we can decide. And so what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to roll over and give in. You and I are going to make a decision together. And the stepmom just heard him do. And she's
Yes.
like, there's hope in this. Like, you and I are working towards finding our essness in the midst of this stressful environment. Let me be very clear. This is not going to fix your ex-spouse. It doesn't make them all of a sudden happy people to be around.
Right.
You may still have the same frustrations, but you as husband and wife are moving toward one another, preserving and protecting your usness, and dealing with the stress from a team posture, which you've heard us. We talk about that all the time and how
Exactly.
important that is. This is helping you get to team. And now that you're a team, now you problem solve and you go, okay, what are we going to do about her request? But at
Yeah.
least you move toward each other rather than just took it out on each other. And that just divides.
And this is a clear illustration of how, okay, if we think that our spouse isn't going to participate in this, she modeled what you do here. As she talked it through and processed it
Mhm.
in her words, then he saw it and he saw her calm down and react in a different way. I mean, who doesn't want that in their marriage when they're used to watching somebody who goes into this dysregulated state? So I think that the way you've explained it shows the value of You work on you, even
Mhm.
if they're not going to participate and do their part. And as you model it, then they can easily jump on board, and maybe not to the same degree that you are, but to some degree be able to see the value of this.
If I could just add a little more, I've seen so many situations like we're describing where the step parent's reactivity makes the biological parent was coming with, "Yeah, I just had a phone call. We're gonna have to work through this." But the step parent's reactivity makes the bio parent go, "Forget it. I don't even wanna
Right.
talk to you about this. I'm
Right.
just gonna go make a solo decision," which is not a good idea, "and I'm probably gonna cave to my ex because it's just the easy way to go." And
Yes.
and all of a sudden, things get worse on every
Mhm.
level. It's the reactivity that drives them into making the wrong decisions.
Exactly.
When we can move toward usness, towards towards supporting and loving each other, now you and I are in a better place to problem solve and come up with an us decision
Mhm.
that helps us feel solidarity in spite of we may end up having to do exactly what the other household wants us to do, but at least we made that decision together,
Right.
not out of anger or hurt or bitterness, but made it with a clear head and a thoughtful head.
And the marriage is still united instead of it being so out of control and that pattern continuing. That's the beauty of what you're saying. I
That's it.
love it, Ron. We've just kind of tip
Yeah.
had the tip of the iceberg, but given enough information for listeners to be able to see and understand. There's so much more in this book
Mm.
that they could learn from, they could gain from, and anything else that you want to say.
Yeah, we're so excited for it. It releases January 7th, but you can pre-order now, of course, and it'll be shipped. In fact, they may ship in about 2 or 3 weeks. You might get it before Christmas, actually. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, again, I can't it depends on where you get it. We also have a bunch of bonus content that is
Okay.
available for free. The book will tell you how to get to it, but I'll just tell you right now.
Yeah.
Go to my personal website, rondeal.org/TMM, as in the mindful marriage,
Okay.
rondeal.org/TMM. And it will take you to a page, very easy, free materials, download, print, share with a friend. I'd love for you to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Ron. Now, this is where I usually ask, okay, where can our listeners find you? I know where to find you, so I'm not going to ask you that. But I am going to tell our listeners and our viewers if they go to familylife.com/blended, they will find your podcast, your articles, learn more about your book there. But what about your speaking calendar? I
Hmm.
know that you and Nan are doing some speaking specifically about this book. Where could they find that?
Yeah, rondeal.org has my calendar for everything I'm doing, step family related or the mindful marriage events, also training professionals, counselors, and ministry leaders. It's all there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you and your work.
Thanks for having me, Gayla.
Ladies, make plans to join us next month for our January live stream on January the 14th. We are excited to welcome Dr. Allison Cook to the live stream. Dr. Allison is a stepmom, she's a therapist, and the author of I Shouldn't Feel This Way, Name What's Hard, Tame Your Guilt, and Transform Self Sabotage into Brave Action. We are going to dive into some of that material and get the new year started well as we continue to learn more about ourselves and how to handle these hard feelings that show up in step families. So make plans to join us for our live conversation January the 14th at 12 p.m. Central. Also, registration for Blended and Blessed is open. If you're not familiar with Blended and Blessed, it's a one-day live event and live stream where we unpack strategies crucial to building unity in your step family. We will be in Franklin, Tennessee on April the 5th of 2025. And this year, Ron and Nan will be presenting key themes from their new book, The Mindful Marriage, that we've been talking about. We'll have other great speakers there. It's always an encouraging and an empowering event for step family couples. So make plans now to join us. And be sure that you're following Family Life Blended on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube and have your notifications turned on so that you're notified when we go live. I love having you join me live every month for our conversation. There were some questions that were put up. I just want you to know we will get to those on. We will answer those comments on social, any that I was not able to answer here on the live stream. God bless you, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Romans 12:18 says, if at all possible, live at peace with everyone. As we learn more about understanding and managing ourselves, as we've talked about today, we'll be better equipped to live at peace with others, which is what Scripture calls us to. So keep pressing on, and I will see you next time.